It was late October of 2016, somewhere deep in the northern woods of Montana, about 20 miles from the nearest small town. I had driven up there alone for a 4-day hunting and camping trip. I was 28 then, and I'd been hunting since I was a teenager, but this was the first time I decided to go completely alone. No friends, no guides, no cell service, no backup. I wanted quiet. I wanted to get away from people, noise, and the constant pressure of city life. I thought a few nights in the cold wilderness would clear my head. The drive up took nearly 6 hours from where I lived. The last part of the route was a rough Forest Service road, narrow and half buried in fallen pine needles and mud. It was early evening when I finally pulled over beside a small clearing near a creek. I parked my old Ford, got out, and the first thing I noticed was how still everything felt. The air was sharp and clean, and the only sound came from the slow running water behind the trees. I set up my tent facing the tree line, maybe 50 yards from the truck, and stacked my supplies, the cooler, lantern, extra gear, in a neat pile near the fire pit. I gathered wood, lit a small fire, and cooked a can of beans before dark swallowed everything around me. The night came quick and heavy. Out there, once the sun dropped, it was pitch black. My flashlight barely reached the edge of the trees. The first night went fine. I didn't sleep great. The ground was cold, and I kept hearing small cracks and rustles outside the tent. But that's normal in the woods. Deer, rabbits, raccoons. I reminded myself of that. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The temperature had dropped below freezing overnight. My breath came out white and thick. I made coffee on the camp stove, grabbed my rifle, and hiked out before first light. I followed a small animal trail up toward the ridge. My plan was to scout for elk, maybe find some tracks, and return later with a better plan. I walked for hours through uneven terrain, stopping often to listen and mark spots on my map. Around noon, I came across something odd. A small old hunting blind made of rotting wood and tarp, tucked low between two boulders. It looked abandoned, but the ground nearby was disturbed, almost as if someone had been there recently. I crouched down, noticed cigarette butts, and a couple of empty beer cans half buried in the dirt. Whoever used that spot wasn't careful. By the time I made it back to camp, the sun was low again. I was tired, hungry, and my legs ached from climbing. I cooked some meat over the fire and sat there for a while, just listening. Around then, I started feeling something strange. A quiet, uneasy tension in the air. It wasn't fear yet, just a pressure, like the forest itself was holding its breath. When I finally crawled into my tent, I heard faint crunching outside. I thought it was a deer. The sound moved slow, circled the area once, then faded. I told myself it was nothing and fell asleep. The third day started normally. I went out again, hiked a few miles north this time, found some elk tracks but nothing worth following. Around midday, I came across a narrow clearing with a dead animal, a deer half buried under leaves. It hadn't been shot. I didn't see a bullet wound. His throat was torn open, but not like a predator kill. It looked messy and deliberate. I stepped back, uneasy. I didn't smell rot yet, which meant it hadn't been there long. Maybe a day, maybe less. I remember feeling watched then. The trees were completely still, but I couldn't shake the sense that something was there. It's strange how the woods can make your mind twist small sounds into warnings. Every crack of a branch, every shift of wind sounded like footsteps. I got back to camp earlier than usual that day. The air felt heavy, colder than before. I built the fire higher just to have more light. The smell of pine smoke helped calm me a little, but that same feeling stayed, like the woods around me were waiting for something. It was sometime around midnight when I woke up to a faint sound outside my tent. It wasn't an animal this time. It was slower, heavier, too steady. Footsteps. I froze, every muscle tensed. The sound moved near the fire pit. My lantern outside was still dimly glowing, and through the thin wall of my tent, I could see a dark shape moving. My first thought was that another hunter had wandered into my camp, maybe drunk or lost, but I hadn't seen a single person in 3 days, and no vehicles had passed by. I reached quietly for my rifle beside me. The steps stopped. Then, I heard a soft rustle, like someone picking something up from the ground. My heart was pounding so loud it drowned everything else. I didn't move. After maybe 30 seconds, the shape shifted again and walked toward the creek, vanishing into the darkness. I waited another minute, then unzipped the tent just a few inches. The fire had burned down to red embers, and the lantern light flickered weakly. I saw prints in the dirt, boot prints, not animal tracks, but clear, heavy boot marks leading toward the trees. That night, I barely slept. I sat inside the tent with the rifle across my lap, listening. Every now and then, I thought I heard movement far off, but I couldn't be sure. When daylight finally came, I stepped out and checked the area. The prints were real, large, deep, and fresh. I followed them a short distance, but they disappeared near the creek bed where the mud turned to rock. I tried to tell myself it was just another hunter camping nearby, maybe cutting through my sight by accident. But there were no other camps, no parked trucks, nothing. The road to this area was blocked off for the season. Nobody should have been up there. By afternoon, I made the decision to leave a day early. I packed my gear fast, trying not to look into the woods too much. It's strange how even the sound of birds feels different when you're afraid. But before I left, I went to grab my cooler from beside the fire pit and noticed that the top was open. Inside, the food was gone. The cans of soda were crushed and tossed aside, and my small hunting knife that I'd left next to it was missing. That moment hit me harder than anything else. Whoever had walked through my camp wasn't just passing by. They had gone through my things while I slept 10 feet away. I loaded everything into the truck as fast as I could. The whole time, I kept glancing into the trees, half expecting someone to step out. Nothing moved, but I swear I could feel eyes on me. The dirt road out of there felt twice as long. My tires slipped on the mud, and every shadow between the pines made me tighten my grip on the wheel. When I finally reached the main road, I stopped for a while, just sitting there, trying to steady myself. A few miles down the highway, I passed a small ranger station. I pulled in and told the officer there what happened, the footprints, the stolen food, the knife. He didn't look surprised. He said that sometimes squatters or even off-grid drifters live deep in the woods out there. Some of them don't like strangers. Some watch camps at night, waiting for supplies to be left unattended. He told me I was lucky. That night, when I finally got home, I unpacked everything in silence. My clothes still smelled like pine smoke and cold dirt. I kept thinking about those boot prints, about the sound of someone moving around my camp while I slept, unarmed and unaware. It's been years since that trip, and I still go hunting, but never alone anymore. I don't camp deep in the woods. I stay near trails, near people, where I can hear the hum of a road or see the faint light of another campfire at night. Because it wasn't the wilderness that scared me out there. It was realizing that someone else had been watching me in the dark the whole time. Someone who never wanted me to see them. Someone who waited until I was asleep to step into the circle of my firelight and go through everything I had. That thought still keeps me awake sometimes. The idea that, in the middle of that quiet forest, I wasn't alone, and never even knew it until the very end. I went camping alone once in the fall of 2017, up in northern Montana near a place called Clear Creek. It was late September, the kind of time when the woods start to quiet down for winter. The air was crisp, the nights were cold, and there was that stillness in the forest that made you feel both peaceful and uneasy at the same time. I had taken a week off from work, I was 29 then, living in Billings, working a job that kept me sitting in front of screens all day. I just wanted quiet. No people, no traffic, just me, a tent, and the woods. The drive to the site took about 4 hours, half of it on cracked asphalt and the rest on a dirt road that wound through tall pines. My plan was simple: hike about 3 miles down the trail, set up camp near the creek, fish a little, and just unwind. I had everything packed neatly: a small one-person tent, sleeping bag, food sealed in bear-proof containers, and a small cooler with some water and drinks. When I got there, I remember noticing how empty everything felt. No other cars near the trailhead, no tire tracks, no voices. Just the sound of wind moving through the trees and the creek in the distance. It wasn't strange, really. The season was over for most campers. Still, it gave me that weird, hollow feeling that comes when you realize you're completely alone miles away from anyone. I started hiking around noon. The trail was narrow, covered with fallen pine needles, and slightly damp from rain a day earlier. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. My boots crunched softly on the dirt, and every now and then I'd hear a woodpecker or a branch snap somewhere off the path. By the time I reached the spot I had marked on my GPS, the sun was sliding lower through the trees. The place was beautiful. The creek curved around a small flat area that was perfect for a tent. There were boulders by the water and a fallen tree that made a natural bench. I set up camp, collected some wood, and built a small fire before it got dark. Everything went smoothly. I ate a quick meal, sat by the fire for a while, and just listened to the water. The temperature dropped fast once the sun went down, and by the time I crawled into my sleeping bag, it must have been in the low 40s. I slept fine that first night, just the occasional sound of the wind. The next day went as planned. Fished for a while, read a book, wandered a bit upstream. It was peaceful, exactly what I wanted. By sunset, I had cooked up the last of the fish and packed everything back in its place. The quiet was heavier that night, though. It was the kind of silence that made you aware of every sound you made. It was around 10 p.m. when I first noticed something off. I had been lying in the tent, half asleep, when I heard movement. Not the small scurrying kind, not like a raccoon or squirrel. It was heavier, slow steps crunching leaves. First, I figured it was a deer. There were plenty of them out there, but the sound stopped too close, right outside the tent, maybe a few feet away. I froze. My first thought was bear. My food was sealed and hung up away from camp, but bears still wander anywhere they want. I reached for the bear spray beside me and waited, holding my breath. Nothing happened. The steps didn't continue, but I could hear faint breathing, slow, steady. It wasn't a snort or the kind of heavy puffing a bear makes. It sounded human. That realization made my chest tighten. I waited maybe 2 minutes before I unzipped the tent, just enough to peek out. The fire had burned low to a few glowing embers, and the woods beyond them were just a wall of black. I couldn't see anyone. I listened hard but heard nothing except the creek and the occasional drip of water from the trees. After a while, I convinced myself it was just my mind exaggerating sounds in the dark. I zipped up the tent and forced myself to try and sleep again, though I didn't sleep much at all. Every small sound had me wide awake. The next morning, I stepped outside early, breath showing in the cold air. I walked around the camp, checking the ground, half expecting to find animal prints. But near the edge of the site, by the creek, there were footprints, human ones. Bootprints. They weren't mine. I could tell because they were larger and the tread was different. They came from the trees and stopped near my tent, then turned back the same way. That's when I felt real unease set in. I kept trying to reason it out. Maybe a hiker had passed through and seen my firelight. Maybe they were just curious. But what kind of hiker walks up to someone's tent at night, stands there, then leaves without saying anything? I told myself to stay calm. I packed up some gear, decided to move closer to the main trail. I didn't want to leave entirely, but I didn't want to be tucked so deep in the trees anymore either. I hiked for maybe an hour and found a more open area near a bend in the creek, closer to the trail. There were signs of old camps, flattened grass, rocks from previous fire pits. I set up again, made lunch, and tried to shake the feeling. The day went slow. I barely moved from camp. I just kept scanning the tree line. Every rustle made me tense. That night, I kept the fire going longer. The air was colder. The sky was clear. I sat with my back to the fire, facing the woods. It was past midnight when I saw light between the trees. Faint, white, moving, like a flashlight. It was maybe 100 yards away, slowly weaving between trunks, then stopping. I watched it for what felt like forever. It didn't move closer, just stayed there, then vanished. I didn't sleep at all after that. At sunrise, I made up my mind to leave. My nerves were shot. I packed everything, stuffed the tent without even folding it right, and started back toward the trailhead. The woods felt different that morning. The quiet had weight to it, and I couldn't shake the thought of someone watching me. About halfway back, I saw something that froze me mid-step. On a tree, just off the trail, there was a small piece of bright orange fabric tied around a branch, the same color as the cord I used to tie my bear bag. I checked my pack. The cord was still there, but one piece from the end was missing. Someone had cut a section off. I don't know when they did it. My throat went dry, and I remember turning in circles, scanning the trees. I didn't see anyone, but from that moment until I reached my car, I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder. Every noise made me flinch. When I finally reached the parking area, the sun was up, and I thought I was in the clear, but then I saw it. On the driver's side door of my car, there was a handprint, faint, smudged, like someone had pressed their palm against the dusty metal. It wasn't mine. My hands were smaller, and I hadn't touched that side when I unloaded. I unlocked the door, got in, and didn't look back once. I drove all the way back to Billings without stopping except for gas. I remember sitting in the car in my driveway for a while, engine off, just listening to the silence. I didn't call the police. What would I even tell them? That someone had watched me at night and tied a piece of my own cord to a tree? They'd think I was imagining it. I never went camping alone again after that. Sometimes, though, when I think back, I realize something that chills me more than anything else. Whoever that was, they must have been close enough to my tent that first night to take the cord, and I never heard them. Not once. The woods have their own kind of silence, one that hides everything if it wants to. And out there, miles from anyone, it's not ghosts or monsters you should be scared of. It's people, quiet, patient people who know how to move through the dark better than you do. It was late summer of 2018 when I decided to take a short solo camping trip in southern France. I had been living in Lyon for almost a year then, working a job that kept me indoors most days. I missed fresh air and silence. I wanted a quiet weekend where I could sit by a fire, cook simple food, and fall asleep to the sound of nature. I picked a small riverside spot near the Ardèche region, not too far from Valenpont-d'Arc. I had been there once before with friends, but this time I wanted to be alone. The area was peaceful, open land surrounded by low, forested hills. A narrow dirt road led down to a wide river bend where I could set up my tent close to the water but still sheltered by trees. I drove out early Friday morning, stopped in a small town for groceries, and reached the site around 2 p.m. It was warm, maybe 26 degrees Celsius, with soft wind rolling through the trees. The air smelled faintly of pine and river stones. I parked my small hatchback on the dirt patch, unpacked my things, and pitched the tent. I brought a folding chair, a small grill, and my camera. The spot felt perfect. Not too isolated, but far enough from the main trail that I couldn't hear cars or people. By evening, I had made myself dinner, some sausages and bread, cooked over a small fire. The sky dimmed slowly, turning orange behind the hills. I sat by the water and watched the reflection of the sky ripple over the current. It was quiet except for the rustle of insects. Around 9 p.m., I packed my food away and zipped up the tent. The night was darker than I expected, but I wasn't scared. Not yet. At some point, I woke up in the middle of the night. I don't know what time it was, but the air had turned colder. The wind had died completely. Everything was still. My bladder was pressing, so I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent. When I stepped out, my breath fogged in the beam of light. The river made a soft, slow sound, the kind you only notice when everything else is silent. I walked a few meters away toward the bushes. I remember thinking how dark it was. No moon, just the faint silver of stars. That's when I saw movement on the other side of the river. It was subtle at first, like someone shifting weight or stepping between trees. My light flickered across the water, but the beam was weak at that distance. I could make out a shape, tall, thin, just standing there. It looked like a man. I thought maybe it was another camper, but the odd thing was he wasn't moving. He was just standing there, facing the river, directly across from me. I turned off my flashlight for a second, thinking maybe the reflection was making shapes, but when my eyes adjusted, I could still see the silhouette. It didn't move, even when I stood still for what felt like a full minute. My stomach tightened. I decided not to stare. I zipped myself back in the tent and lay down, pretending nothing had happened. My heart wouldn't slow down for a long time, though. I could still picture the figure, tall, unmoving, watching the water in silence. When morning came, I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe just a local fisherman or a hiker who had stopped there for the night. The daylight made everything look normal again. I made coffee, cooked some eggs, and went for a short walk upriver. The forest smelled fresh after dew. I saw a few boot prints near the shore, not mine, but they could have belonged to anyone. Still, the thought of someone standing there all night bothered me. I decided to stay one more night and then leave early Sunday morning. The second evening, the sky turned cloudy. The air felt heavier, like rain might come. Around 6 p.m., I noticed something strange. Across the river, near where I had seen that man, there was a small makeshift structure. At first, I thought it was just piled wood or rocks, but when I looked closer through my camera lens, I realized it was a little lean-to made of branches and cloth. The kind of thing someone might build if they were living rough out here. That made me uneasy. I hadn't heard any other campers or cars all day. No voices, no signs of people. But clearly, someone was staying across the river. As the sun went down, I tried not to focus on it. I cooked dinner again and tried to distract myself with a book. Around 9:30, the air grew damp, and I could smell rain in the distance. I packed my food away carefully and doused the fire so it wouldn't draw attention. The night dragged on slowly. Every sound outside felt sharper. The crunch of twigs, the shifting of the wind through trees. Around 11 p.m., I heard something that made my blood run cold. It was the faint crack of branches from the direction of the river, but closer, much closer than before. I froze. I turned off my flashlight and sat still, trying to listen. The sound came again. Slow, deliberate footsteps. They were on my side of the river now. I could hear the water running faintly, and behind it, the soft rhythm of someone walking along the dirt near my car. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My tense fabric felt paper thin, like it wouldn't protect me from anything. The steps stopped a few meters away. Then, nothing. Just the steady hum of crickets and my heart pounding in my ears. I sat there for maybe half an hour, not daring to make a sound. Eventually, I heard the steps again, this time moving away, slowly crunching back toward the river. After a while, silence returned. I stayed awake until dawn, gripping the small camping knife I always kept near my sleeping bag. When light finally came, I unzipped the tent carefully and looked around. The grass near my car was flattened in two spots. Clear footprints, large ones pressed deep in the soil. They circled near my car and then led toward the riverbank. I followed them until they disappeared near the water's edge. I looked across the river again. The makeshift structure I'd seen before was gone. Just scattered branches and torn cloth lying in the mud. That was enough for me. I packed up everything within an hour. My hands shook as I rolled the tent. I didn't bother making breakfast. Before leaving, I noticed something else that still makes my stomach twist even now. On the driver's side mirror of my car, smeared faintly across the glass, was the shape of a handprint. It was streaked with mud, but long and narrow, like someone had rested their hand there while leaning in. I got in the car and drove out of there fast, bouncing over the dirt road until I reached the paved one. I didn't stop until I was back in the nearest town. I sat in a parking lot outside a bakery, trying to steady my breathing. Later that day, I told myself maybe it was just a homeless man, someone living out there alone, maybe scavenging or curious about my camp. I didn't report it. It didn't feel like a crime, just something strange, something that didn't belong. But what unsettled me most was how quiet he had been, how close he'd gotten without me hearing him cross the water. I never camped alone again after that. Sometimes, when I drive near forests or rivers, I still find myself glancing across the water, half expecting to see a tall, still figure standing on the other side, watching silently. And every time I do, I remember that night. The cold air, the muddy handprint, and the feeling of being truly, completely alone, except for someone who didn't want to be seen. It was late October 2017, somewhere in northern Colorado. I was 31 then, and after a long few months at work, I decided to take a solo weekend trip into the mountains. I'd done plenty of camping before, so I wasn't nervous. I wanted a quiet weekend, away from the noise of people and my phone. The weather had been mild all week, though a cold front was supposed to roll in by Sunday. That didn't bother me. I packed my tent, sleeping bag, small propane stove, a hatchet, and enough food for 2 days. I left early Friday morning before sunrise. The drive was peaceful, the air getting thinner and cooler as the road climbed higher into the forest. I reached a remote clearing around noon. No campsites, no markers, just forest and silence. I picked a spot near a small creek, where the sound of running water would cover the quiet at night. I set up my tent under a line of tall pines, gathered some wood, and took a short hike up a ridge nearby. From up there, I could see miles of thick green forest, no smoke, no trails, nothing man-made. Felt good. I stayed up there until the light began to fade, then made my way back down before dark. As night fell, I built a small fire. The temperature dropped quickly, and the smell of pine mixed with smoke hung in the air. I ate a simple meal, canned beans and jerky, and sat by the fire until I started feeling tired. The forest around me was alive with sound. Crickets, the rustle of wind through the trees, the occasional crack of something falling somewhere in the dark. It wasn't frightening at first. Felt natural. When I crawled into my tent, I was warm, tired, and content. Sometime in the night, I woke up to a faint sound, something like heavy steps in the brush. I lay still, listening. The fire had died down to faint orange coals. I thought maybe it was a deer or a raccoon. The steps were slow, dragging through the leaves, pausing now and then. I held my breath, trying not to make a sound. Whatever it was stopped just outside the range of the dim light from the fire. I could hear breathing, slow, uneven, then silence. After what felt like a long time, I unzipped the tent a few inches and peered out. The firelight flickered over the trees, but I didn't see anything. just the edge of the woods, still and dark. I listened for a few minutes longer, then convinced myself it was an animal and went back to sleep. The next morning, the air was damp and cold. A thin layer of fog hung low between the trees. I walked around the area, checking the ground. About 20 feet from my tent, I found tracks. Not boot prints, but bare footprints. The ground was soft with mud near the creek, and the prints were clear, human-sized but wider, heavier. I crouched there for a long time, staring at them. I tried to come up with something logical. Maybe some hiker had wandered through in the night, though it didn't make sense. No lights, no sound, no reason to be there barefoot. Still, I brushed it off. I told myself maybe they were old, maybe just distorted animal prints. I packed up a few things and decided to spend most of the day exploring the ridge again. By afternoon, the weather started changing. The wind picked up, and the temperature dropped fast. I could smell rain coming. I hiked back and gathered extra firewood before the storm hit. The first drops started falling just as I got the fire going. The rain turned heavy quickly, cold and steady, soaking through the trees and into the ground. I stayed inside the tent, wrapped in my sleeping bag, listening to the steady drumming of rain on the nylon. It was calming at first, but then I started hearing something else. Faint thuds, dull and irregular. I thought maybe branches falling, but the sound came from the same direction as before, from the tree line. The light outside faded faster than usual under the thick clouds. The forest turned almost black except for the glow of my small lantern inside the tent. I turned it off to save the battery and sat in the dark. The sound of the rain filled everything, but under it, there was movement again, soft, deliberate, moving closer. I could hear the wet ground squelch beneath each step. I reached for my flashlight, clicked it on, and shone it through the thin fabric of the tent. The light cast a faint glow outside, enough to see shadows shifting just beyond the tent wall. My stomach dropped. I unzipped the tent just enough to look through the small gap. The rain was heavy, blurring everything, but I could see movement. Something standing near the fire pit. The coals had gone out hours ago, but there was a figure, human-shaped, standing still. It didn't move for several seconds. Then it stepped back into the trees. I stayed frozen, watching until I couldn't see it anymore. My hands were shaking, and my throat felt dry. I didn't leave the tent the rest of the night. I just sat there, listening. Every so often I'd hear faint crunches in the distance, then silence. When morning came, the rain had stopped, but everything was soaked. The ground was covered in mud, and the fog was thicker than before. I stepped outside slowly, scanning the area. The first thing I noticed was the tracks again, clearer this time, circling my tent. I counted at least 4 separate prints, all barefoot. Some were deep, as if the person, or whatever it was, had stood there for a long time. My stomach turned cold. I decided to pack up right away. I didn't care about breakfast or staying another night. I just wanted to leave. As I packed, I noticed something hanging from a low branch near the creek. At first, I thought it was a strip of bark, but when I got closer, I saw it was fabric, part of a torn shirt, faded and dirty. There were faint stains on it, maybe mud, maybe something else. It looked like it had been there a while, tangled around the branch. I didn't touch it. I just stared at it for a moment before turning back toward my tent. My nerves were raw, every sound making me flinch. By the time I got everything packed, the fog had thickened so much I could barely see 20 feet ahead. I followed the creek downstream, thinking it would lead back to the road eventually. The silence was heavier now. Even the birds were quiet. My boots sank into the mud as I walked. Every now and then, I'd glance back and think I saw something pale between the trees. Maybe a face, maybe just the light hitting the mist. I kept walking faster. After maybe an hour, I reached a slope that looked familiar, the same ridge I'd climbed the first day. Relief hit me, but it didn't last long. As I started down, I saw another footprint, fresh in the wet ground. The same wide, bare print. It was facing the direction I had just come from, as if something had been following me, matching my path. I didn't stop again. I just kept going, sliding and stumbling down the ridge until I reached the dirt road where my truck was parked. The truck was covered in a layer of wet leaves, untouched, but there were muddy prints on the driver's side door. Smudged, unclear, but there. I jumped inside, locked the doors, and started the engine. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the keys. The drive down the mountain felt like it took hours. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station near the main highway. When I stepped out, I realized how tense my body was, like I'd been holding my breath for days. I told myself maybe it was some local, maybe a hunter who liked to mess with people camping alone. But deep down, I knew the way those prints circled the tent, the way whoever it was stood there in the rain. It wasn't some joke. It felt deliberate, patient. I never went back to that part of Colorado again. A week later, I read a local article online about a missing man, a hiker last seen months before in the same forest area. They'd found some of his belongings scattered near a creek, but no body. The photo of his torn blue shirt looked just like the piece of fabric I'd seen hanging from that branch. Every time it rains now, I still hear that slow, wet sound of footsteps in the mud. I don't camp alone anymore. I don't even go near the woods at night. And sometimes, when I wake up in the dark and hear the rain against my window, I catch myself holding my breath, listening for that sound again. It was October 2017 when I decided to go camping alone in the desert of northern Arizona. I had been driving from Flagstaff to Page, chasing sunsets and quiet places to get away from everything for a weekend. I was 26 back then, and I liked being out where it felt like the whole world was asleep. I'd done a few solo camping trips before, but never this deep into Navajo land. There were signs along the dirt road that warned travelers not to go off trail, but I figured it was meant for tourists. I had a 4-wheel drive truck, extra fuel, and enough food and water for 3 days. The air was dry, the sky a flat gray before dusk, and the wind had that sharp edge that tells you winter isn't far off. I stopped around 5 p.m. when I found a flat, open patch of dirt near a line of low red rocks. It looked like a perfect spot to set up. I pitched my tent next to my truck, made a small fire with some driftwood I'd gathered, and set up my small propane stove for later. The silence around me felt thick. No birds, no bugs, nothing. Just the wind brushing over the sand and the occasional sound of my fire crackling. As the sun dropped, the whole desert turned orange and then quickly to dark red. I remember sitting there, eating from a tin of chili and watching the last light fade behind the rocks. That's when I noticed something odd. A shape in the distance, far across the open ground. It looked like a deer, maybe half a mile away, standing perfectly still. Its head was turned toward me. I didn't think much of it at first, but even after a few minutes, it didn't move. Not an inch, just standing there, stiff, like it was waiting for something. I got up, walked around my fire, and when I looked again, it was gone. I told myself it must have walked off when I wasn't looking. Still, something about the stillness of it bothered me. Animals don't stand that still for that long. When the sky finally went black, I threw more wood into the fire and zipped myself into my sleeping bag. The wind had died down, leaving the air silent again. I could hear the faint hum of my truck cooling beside me. I must have fallen asleep around 10. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Slow, heavy steps circling around the tent. My first thought was that it was an animal, a coyote maybe, but these footsteps weren't light or quick. They sounded like someone walking barefoot on gravel, crunching slow, deliberate. My heart started pounding, and I held my breath, trying to listen. The steps moved behind the tent, then stopped. I didn't move. I didn't even unzip the bag. I just lay there, staring into the darkness above me. Then I heard a sound, soft breathing, just outside the thin nylon wall. I could hear it exhale. I remember every muscle in my body locking up. The sound was human, no doubt, but it was uneven, raspy, almost like someone who hadn't spoken in a long time. I waited, not daring to move. The breathing went quiet, and after what felt like forever, I finally heard it walk away. The crunch of the dirt faded off into the distance. I didn't sleep again that night. I just waited for light. When the sun came up, I got out and looked around. There were footprints in the dirt, bare feet. The ground was hard-packed, so they weren't clear, but I could see the general shape, long and narrow, with deep heel marks. Whoever it was had walked around the tent twice. I should have packed up and left then. But I told myself maybe it was some local passing through, maybe curious. I stayed another night, though I felt uneasy all day. Every sound made me flinch. The wind, the creak of my truck cooling in the sun, even the crunch of my own boots. That evening, I went to gather more wood from near the rocks. As I climbed up a bit, I saw something hanging from a branch of a dead tree. A piece of fur, long and coarse, like a strip of animal hide, torn and hanging loose. It didn't look fresh, but it also didn't look like it had been there long. When I touched it, it was stiff but not dried out completely. I felt something in my gut twist. Back at camp, I kept the fire high, refusing to let it die down. I didn't eat. I just sat there staring out into the dark. Around 9 p.m., I heard a noise again. Something far off at first, a kind of low scream or wail, not an animal I could recognize. It wasn't loud, but it carried far through the empty space. Then silence again. My chest felt tight, and I started thinking about driving out right then. But the desert road was rough, and I didn't want to risk blowing a tire in the dark. I told myself I'd leave first thing in the morning. Later that night, I heard it again, the footsteps. Same slow, dragging steps around the tent. I sat up this time, holding the small hatchet I kept by my sleeping bag. The sound stopped. Then I heard something brushing against the side of the tent, low and close to the ground. The fabric shifted slightly inward, like something pressing against it from outside. My breathing got shallow. I couldn't tell if it was an animal crawling or a person lying down beside the tent. Then came that breathing again, closer this time, a wheezing sound. I could hear it move slowly along the tent, pausing near where my head was. I clenched the hatchet tighter, my palms sweating so bad I thought I'd drop it. Then something scraped across the fabric, a long dragging sound like a fingernail or a stick being pulled slowly down. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent in one motion, ready to swing. The light hit nothing, just open sand and darkness. But then, just beyond the glow of the light, maybe 20 feet away, something stood. It looked like a man, but its posture was all wrong. Bent forward, arms hanging strangely low, head tilted to one side. Its skin looked pale under the light, and for a second, I thought it was wearing some kind of mask. Then it moved, jerky, too fast, and dropped out of view behind the rocks. I ran straight to the truck, threw everything inside without packing properly, and turned the ignition. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped the keys twice. When the engine finally caught, I hit the gas and drove off the dirt patch, not caring where the road was. I just wanted distance. I drove until sunrise, the tires bouncing hard off the uneven trail. I didn't stop until I reached a small gas station near Cameron. My whole body felt wired, like I hadn't taken a full breath in hours. I stepped out and saw the back of my truck in daylight, dirt smeared across the tailgate, long streaks like handprints dragged along it. I didn't report anything. Who would I even tell? I told myself it was some lunatic out there, maybe a hermit or someone high on something. But what keeps me up even now is that I never saw any footprints near the truck that morning. Not a single one leading away. For a long time after that, I couldn't shake the memory of how it moved, the way it seemed too wrong to be human yet too deliberate to be an animal. People tell stories about things out there, things that wear skin that isn't theirs. I used to laugh at that, but after that night, every time I think back, every detail feels sharper. The smell of the air, the weight of the silence, the way that breathing sounded just inches away. I sold that tent a week later. Haven't gone camping alone since. Sometimes, when I drive past that stretch of desert, I catch myself looking out at the red rocks, half expecting to see something standing still again, watching. It was early October of 2016 when I decided to go camping alone in the northern part of Idaho. I was 28 then, and I'd been trying to get away from work stress for weeks. I picked a spot near Priest Lake, not too far from the Canadian border, deep inside a forest that looked untouched by time. The weather forecast had mentioned possible rain, but I didn't care. I wanted peace, quiet, and some time to clear my head. I had camped alone before, so I wasn't too concerned. I packed my truck with my tent, a sleeping bag, a cooler of food, my hunting knife, a flashlight, and a small propane stove. By late afternoon, I reached a small dirt road that led into the woods. The road was rough, filled with potholes, wet leaves, and broken branches. It was the kind of place where cell service disappeared completely. The air was damp, and the forest smelled of pine and earth. I parked near a clearing by a small stream, maybe a 10-minute walk from the lake itself. The spot looked perfect, quiet, flat, and far enough from the water to stay dry. I set up my tent, gathered some dry wood, and lit a small fire before the sky started to darken. The first drops of rain began just after sunset. They were light at first, tapping on the tarp like fingers. I sat by the fire, eating a can of chili, watching the woods grow darker around me. The smoke drifted low and heavy because of the humidity, and the forest seemed to muffle all sound except for the rain. No wind, no birds, just the steady dripping and the crackle of wet wood. By around 9, the rain got heavier. I put out the fire before it drowned itself and crawled into my tent. The nylon walls shook softly under the rain, and the sound was oddly calming. I lay on my back, staring at the top of the tent, listening to the rhythm of the drops. I must have drifted off for an hour or so before I woke up again. Not because of thunder or cold, but because of a sound I couldn't place. It wasn't the rain. It wasn't the stream either. It was slower, uneven, something moving outside. The kind of sound that instantly pulls you out of sleep. A crunch of wet leaves, a shuffle, then silence. I froze. My breathing felt too loud inside the tent. The rain covered some of the noise, but I could still hear something, or someone, walking. The steps were heavy, like boots pressing into mud. I tried to convince myself it was an animal, a deer maybe, or a bear. But something about the rhythm didn't match. It stopped and started again. It moved closer to the tent, then paused. My flashlight was right next to me, but I didn't dare turn it on. The light would have given away exactly where I was inside. So I stayed still, trying to control my breathing, listening as the steps circled the tent once. Then they stopped. For a long minute, there was nothing but rain. I could hear the water running off the tarp and dripping into the mud. I waited for the steps to fade away, but they didn't. The silence grew heavier, and I realized whoever or whatever was out there was just standing still, watching. I could feel it. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would give me away. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I heard movement again, slow, steady, fading away into the trees. I waited another 5 minutes before I dared to move. I quietly unzipped my sleeping bag, grabbed the flashlight, and pointed it at the tent wall, just enough to see its faint outline. No shadow. No movement. I listened again. Nothing but rain. I didn't sleep much after that. I lay there, eyes open, muscles tense, waiting for any sound to return. It must have been around 3 in the morning when I finally started to relax. The rain had turned to a soft drizzle by then. I told myself it had probably been an animal after all, just curious. I was half asleep when I heard it again, that same slow, deliberate crunch of steps. But this time it wasn't circling. It was approaching directly from the side of the stream. I could hear the squelch of mud and the occasional snap of a branch. Whoever it was, they were moving quietly but not quiet enough. The sound stopped right outside my tent. I could hear breathing now, faint but clear. Slow, steady breaths through the rain. Then something brushed against the side of the tent. A light touch, like a hand running along the fabric. I felt it drag from one end to the other. My whole body went rigid. I gripped my knife without realizing it. The figure outside stayed there, just a dark shape pressed faintly against the tent wall. Then it backed away slowly, and I heard steps again, retreating, fading into the forest. I didn't sleep after that. I waited until the faint light of dawn started to seep through the trees before unzipping the tent. Everything outside was soaked. The fire pit was half filled with muddy water. I scanned the ground around the tent. The first thing I noticed were footprints, not animal tracks, but clear boot prints. Large ones, fresh. They led from the direction of the stream, circled my tent twice, and disappeared back into the trees. I packed up in silence, barely eating anything. My hands shook the entire time. The forest was quiet again, too quiet. No birds, no insects, nothing. Just that heavy, wet air that follows a night of rain. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see someone standing at the tree line. No one was there, but that didn't make it feel any better. When I finally got to my truck, I noticed something else. A set of muddy handprints on the driver's side door. Big ones, smeared like someone had tried to open it during the night. I checked the locks, still sealed. Thank God. I started the engine and got the hell out of there without looking back. The drive back to town took nearly 2 hours, and I don't remember half of it. I just remember gripping the wheel so tight my fingers hurt. Once I reached a gas station with service. I called the local ranger office and told them what happened. They sent someone to check the site later that day. A few days after, a ranger called me back. He said they found the campsite, but the rain had washed away most of the prints. He mentioned that there had been reports over the past few months of a man seen wandering around the northern woods. No one local, just someone camping illegally, stealing food, and sleeping in abandoned cabins. They hadn't been able to catch him yet. That was the last I ever went camping alone. Sometimes, even now, I still think about that night. The sound of those steps, the dragging touch along the tent wall, the way it felt knowing someone was standing inches away from me while I lay there in the dark, pretending to be asleep. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't some creature. It was a person, and that somehow makes it a lot worse. It was late August of 2014 when I decided to spend a few days camping alone in a quiet part of northern Ontario. I was 27 then, working a job that kept me indoors most of the time, and I'd been craving some solitude, just trees, fresh air, and the kind of silence that feels like a reset button. I chose a spot about 30 kilometers north of a small town called Chapleau, deep in the woods, far enough that I'd have to drive along gravel roads for nearly an hour after leaving the main highway. I didn't plan on seeing another person the whole time, and that idea made me feel oddly calm. The area was known for being thick with spruce and birch, the kind of forest that looked almost untouched. I found a small clearing next to a narrow stream. The ground was soft with pine needles, and I set up my small tent facing the water. The air had that damp smell of soil and moss, the kind that seeps into everything. By late afternoon, I had a fire going, my gear unpacked, and I was sitting on a folding chair, listening to the water move over the rocks. The first day went quietly. I cooked a small meal on my camping stove and watched the sun drop behind the trees. By the time the forest got dark, everything went still except for the occasional sound of water or an owl calling somewhere far off. I remember thinking how clean the night air felt compared to the city. Sometime during that first night, I woke up for no clear reason. It was completely dark inside the tent, and I could hear the stream softly running nearby. What pulled me fully awake was the sound of something crunching through the woods. Slow, heavy steps. Not a deer, I could tell that much. The weight of each step was deliberate, uneven, and close. My heart started beating faster as I listened. The sound stopped somewhere just beyond the light of the dying fire. I held my breath, waiting, then nothing, just silence again. After several minutes, I told myself it could have been a raccoon or maybe a moose moving through the trees. Eventually, I drifted back to sleep, though I kept waking up to every small sound after that. The next morning, I walked around the area. There were faint impressions in the soft soil, not boot prints exactly, but definitely not animal tracks either. The ground was uneven with pine needles, so it was hard to tell. I brushed it off, ate breakfast, and spent most of the day hiking a few kilometers upstream. I saw no one, no other campsites, nothing that suggested anyone else had been nearby. That second night, I decided to keep the fire burning longer, throwing on extra wood before getting into my sleeping bag. Around midnight, I woke up again. This time, I didn't hear footsteps at first, just the faint clink of something metallic, like metal tapping on metal. It was coming from somewhere behind my tent. I froze. The air felt heavier, like the whole forest was holding its breath. Then I heard slow movement again, circling around the camp. My mind went blank with fear. I didn't move. I just listened as it passed on the far side of the fire pit. I could hear the dry leaves crunching underfoot, careful, deliberate steps. Then the sound faded, swallowed by the distance and the trees. I stayed awake until dawn, my flashlight in hand, every muscle in my body tense. When the sun came up, I got out and walked around. The woods looked normal, calm, as if nothing had happened. But near one of the trees behind the tent, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. A small pile of stones stacked in a neat column, maybe 10 inches high. I hadn't done that. It hadn't been there the day before. I stared at it for a long time, trying to reason it out. Maybe some hiker had left it, but it looked fresh. The ground around it was disturbed, small scuffs in the soil, and one larger mark that looked like the toe of a boot had dragged. I decided to stay one more night, though I didn't feel as relaxed anymore. I spent the day fishing, trying to distract myself, but every sound from the forest made me turn my head. The feeling of being watched crept in slowly, like a weight I couldn't shake. By the time evening came, the woods looked darker than before. The air had cooled fast, and clouds had rolled in, covering the moon. I ate early, then sat near the fire, trying to convince myself that I was imagining things. Around 9 p.m., I thought I saw movement between the trees on the opposite side of the stream. Just a shape, darker than the shadows, moving slightly. I stared for what felt like minutes, but it didn't move again. I went into my tent, zipped it closed, and lay there listening. Sometime after midnight, I heard the crunching again, closer this time, came right up to the edge of my camp. I could hear breathing, slow and rough, like someone trying to stay quiet but not quite managing. I felt my body freeze completely. The footsteps stopped just outside the tent, near the corner where my backpack was. Then came the sound of fabric brushing, something touching the side of the tent lightly, as if tracing the outline. I stayed perfectly still. The only thing between me and whoever it was were 2 layers of nylon. After a few seconds, the sound stopped, and I could hear slow steps moving away. The breathing faded, replaced again by the stillness of the forest. I didn't sleep at all after that. When daylight finally came, I stepped out cautiously. My backpack had been moved. It was sitting a few feet from where I'd left it, half open. Inside, nothing was missing, but the contents were rearranged. My flashlight on top, my knife pulled halfway from its sheath. I packed everything as fast as I could. I didn't even bother making breakfast. As I was breaking down the tent, I noticed something across the stream, right where I thought I'd seen movement the night before. It was another stack of stones, taller this time, with a small piece of cloth tied around one of them. I couldn't make out what kind of cloth it was, but it looked worn and dirty. I stood there staring for a long time, then realized that the trees behind it had faint marks on them, like scratches made with something sharp. By the time I got into my truck, my hands were shaking. I drove fast down that narrow dirt road, checking my mirrors every few minutes. At one point, I thought I saw someone standing far back along the tree line as I drove away, a figure just barely visible between the trunks. But I didn't stop to look. When I reached the main road, I finally felt like I could breathe again. I drove all the way back to town and checked into a small roadside motel, still dirty and exhausted. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the sounds, the breathing, the piles of stones, the feeling of something standing right outside the thin wall of my tent. I never found out who it was or why they were out there. Maybe it was some local living rough in the woods, maybe a hunter passing through, or maybe someone who just liked to watch campsites from the dark. Whatever it was, I knew I'd pushed my luck staying as long as I did. The next morning, I drove back home without looking back. I sold most of my camping gear a week later. I still go hiking sometimes, but only during the day and never alone. Every time I hear branches crack in the distance, a part of me goes right back to that night. Lying in the dark, knowing someone was standing just inches away, listening to me breathe.